Hi everybody, my name is Beatrice and welcome to Storytime with Bee. Today we're going to be reading Joan Procter, Dragon Doctor, the woman who loved reptiles. And we have a special guest today. He's right behind me. He's bristling in like my chair really. And his name is Rumble. He's my bearded dragon and I love him with all my heart. And so he's out because of the book. It's about Joan Procter, who loved reptiles and had for all her life. And so I think that the reason why we're reading this story is because, Joan Procter's really inspired me to want to become a herpetologist. And if you watch my other videos, you will notice that my dreams change by the week. Another reason why we're reading this book is because it's Women's History Month. We're on our third book in the Women's History Month series, and so that's another important thing. And so let's dive into the story. Joan Procter, Dragon Doctor, the woman who loved reptiles, by Patricia Valdez, illustrated by Felicita, Sala. Patricia Valdez is a scientist who loves writing for children. She earned her PhD in molecular and cell biology from the University of California, Berkeley, and works at the National Institutes of Health. Originally from Texas, she now lives in the Washington, D.C. area. This is her first picture book. Felicita Sala is a self-taught artist who studied philosophy at the University of Western Australia. She has worked on several animation projects, but her passion is making picture books. Felicita lives in Rome with her husband and daughter. Joan Procter was born in 1897 in London, England, to Joseph and Elizabeth Procter. She began collecting lizards and snakes when she was 10 years old. Joan attended St. Paul's Girls' School in London, but due to a chronic intestinal illness, she missed a large portion of school. Still, Joan was a very bright student. Joan presented her observations of komodo dragons at the scientific meeting of the Zoological Society of London on October 23, 1928. Joan's chronic health problems began to worsen at this time. She was in pain most days, but she managed to keep up with the daily activities of the Reptile House. At age 34, Joan passed away in her sleep due to complications from her chronic illness. Until the end of her life, visitors to the London Zoo often saw Joan riding in her wheelchair while Simbawa walked alongside her. And to this day, if you visit the London Zoo, just inside the Reptile House, you'll find a marble bust of Joan, keeping watch over all the creatures inside. For Mateo and Maya, may you always be fearless. PV. For Samuel the Scientist. FS. Back in the days of long skirts and afternoon teas, a little girl named Joan Procter entertained the most unusual party guests. Slithery and scaly, they turned over teacups. They crawled past the crumpets, while other girls read stories about dragons and princesses. Joan read books about lizards and crocodiles. Instead of a favorite doll, a favorite lizard accompanied her wherever she went. Each day after school, Joan retreated to her bedroom, where she studied lizards, snakes, and turtles. She took careful notes, just like a scientist. And on the days Joan was too sick to attend school, tiny toes and eager eyes cheered her up. The reptiles were quiet and watchful, just like Joan. For her 16th birthday, Joan received a most curious gift, a baby crocodile. She tied a little ribbon around his waist and took him for a walk. She even brought him to math class one day. The students shrieked. The teacher recoiled. Apparently, crocodiles were not welcome at school. When Joan grew older, she skipped the parties and dances with her friends. Instead, she sought out the Curator of Reptiles and Fish at the Natural History Museum. There, Joan and the curator talked snake scales, size, shape, texture, patterns, and even evolution. Sometimes Joan smuggled in her crocodile, to the delight of the curator. He knew right away that Joan was special. But soon, these carefree days came to an end. England was at war. Women took up jobs left behind by men. The curator found himself short-staffed at the museum, so he hired Joan as his assistant. Joan flourished at the Natural History Museum. As a scientist, she surveyed the museum's vast collections and published research papers on pit vipers and pancake tortoises. As an artist, she created exquisite models and drawings for the reptile exhibits. When the curator retired, Joan took over. Men returning from war were surprised to find a woman in charge. But times were changing, and Joan was leading the way. A few years later, the London Zoo decided to replace its old, outdated reptile house. The zoo director asked Joan to design a new home for the animals. Joan knew exactly how to keep reptiles happy. She added elaborate lighting and state-of-the-art heaters that provided hot spots to keep the cold-blooded animals warm. She brought in plants and created artwork that mimicked each animal's natural environment. Joan took extra care designing one enclosure in particular. By this time, stories had emerged of a fierce man-eating lizard with a long, forked tongue living on a faraway Indonesian island of Komodo. It was rumored to be 30 feet long, faster than a motor car, stronger than an ox. They called it the Komodo dragon. The stories didn't frighten Joan. She dreamed of studying the dragons up close. On opening day of the new Reptile House, visitors packed the zoo. They gawked at the geckos. They peered at the pythons. And they marveled at the monitors. But when they reached Joan's special enclosure, they gasped. 2 7-foot-long lizards stared back at them. Real-life dragons. Although the visitors were thrilled, Joan was concerned. One of the Komodo dragons, Simbawa, did not look well. To the shock of the zoo guest, Joan entered the enclosure. She moved Simbawa to the reptile clinic with the help of 6 nervous keepers. The dragon let Joan clean a sore in his mouth with no fuss at all. In fact, he thanked Joan by licking her face. Joan thought Simbawa was brave. The keepers thought Joan was brave. News of Joan and the Komodo dragons spread. Reporters flocked to the reptile house with questions. Had she ever been bitten? Was she afraid of the dragons? What kind of a woman runs a reptile house? Joan wished the reporters would ask about the animals instead. Joan cared for each and every creature in the reptile house, from daily health checks to delicate surgeries. Her dedication and talent could not be matched. Scientists all over the world read about Joan's research, her clinical skills, and the success of the new reptile house. She became an international sensation. The Zoological Society of London invited Joan to present her Komodo dragon research at a scientific meeting. As Joan took the stage, she wheeled out Simbawa, sitting freely atop a large table. The audience squirmed in their seats. Joan stroked Simbawa's head and fed him a pigeon. He ate it in one gulp. Simbawa wandered through the audience as Joan explained that the reports of Komodo dragons were greatly exaggerated. They could grow up to 10 feet, not 30. They ran fast, but not as fast as the motor car. They could be fierce, but they were mostly gentle. When Joan finished her presentation, Sumbawa returned to her side. The audience erupted in applause. Joan's passion for reptiles never waned. For the rest of her life, she could be found walking or riding through the zoo, with Sumbawa by her side. And just like when she was a little girl, Joan often hosted children's tea parties at the Reptile House with her scaly friends. Sumbawa was the guest of honor. Thank you for joining us for Storytime with Bee. I hope you enjoyed today's story. And if you did, you can learn about other female scientists in history like Mary Anning and Jane Goodall. And join us for our next story, The ABCs of AOC. So, bye! You ready, Rumble? Take one.
Ignore Rumble, okay?
Oh, it's so hard. When the curator retired, Joan took over.
When did he retire?
I said retire. You didn't hear
No,
me?
you said retire.
No, I said retire.
No, you didn't.
It's all about a woman who loves reptiles, and bearded dragons are reptiles. So, Rumble, do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi? Okay, I don't think Rumble wants to say hi right now. And this is my bearded dragon, Rumble, or the little dude. And so this is Rumble, my bearded dragon. He is absolutely adorable in my opinion. He has my whole heart. He's the special guest because, well, it's about a woman who loved reptiles, and bearded dragons are reptiles. I hope you enjoyed the story. And so, bye!